The signal came at 3 in the morning, when the city of Seoul was quiet and the stars above Earth shone bright and cold. Doctor sat alone in the deep space monitoring station, drinking her fourth cup of coffee and watching numbers scroll across her screen. She had worked this shift for 6 years. Most nights, she heard nothing but the empty noise of space, radio waves from distant stars, the hum of old satellites, the silence between worlds. But tonight was different. The signal was weak at first, just a small spike in the data, almost ignored it. She almost went back to her coffee and her quiet thoughts, but something made her stop. Something made her lean forward and look closer. The spike came again and again, a pattern, a rhythm that was not natural. This was not the random noise of the universe. This was a message. Hands moved fast across her keyboard. She captured the signal and began to clean it, removing the static and interference that came from traveling across light years of empty space. Her heart beat faster as the pattern became clear. It was a voice, alien strange, but unmistakably a voice. She ran it through the translation system. The computer worked for several minutes, comparing the sounds to every known alien language in the database. Finally, words appeared on her screen. "They are killing us, please, anyone help us." Read the words 3 times. Then she reached for her phone and made a call that would change human history. Within 1 hour, the United Earth Command Center was fully active. Lights blazed in every window. Officers rushed through corridors with data pads in their hands. The council members arrived in their formal uniforms, their faces serious and tired. Admiral Park stood at the back of the main conference room, watching the chaos with calm eyes. He was 53 years old, with gray at his temples and lines on his face that told stories of battles and losses. He did not speak as the politicians argued. He simply watched and waited. The signal played again for everyone to hear. The alien voice filled the room, desperate and afraid. "The message comes from a system called," explained to the council. "The species calls themselves the. According to galactic records, they have been under the control of the Dominion for 300 years. The one council member said, his voice heavy with dislike. "Of course." Everyone in the room knew the. They were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. When humanity first developed faster-than-light travel 20 years ago, they were among the first to make contact. They had sent an emissary to Earth with a generous offer. Humanity could join the galactic community as service partners of the Dominion. In exchange for labor and resources, they would provide protection. Humanity had refused. The Council at that time did not like the word service. It sounded too much like slavery. They had not taken the refusal well. They did not attack Earth. That would have been too direct, too obvious. Instead, they simply all support. When human colonies faced pirate raids, they sent no help. When human ships were attacked in neutral space, they looked away. When humanity asked other species for alliance, those species suddenly became too busy or too afraid. The message was clear: accept your place or suffer alone. Admiral Park remembered this well. He remembered it every day, because one of those abandoned colonies had been stationed where his younger sister lived with her family. The pirates came with 5 ships. The station's small defense force held them off for 6 hours, begging for help on every channel. They heard those calls. Everyone heard those calls. No one came. 14,000 people died that day, including sister, including her husband, including their 2 children. The council debated for hours. Some wanted to ignore the signal. They were not human. Their problems were not Earth's problems. Getting involved would anger the and put human colonies at risk. Others wanted to send a diplomatic message, express concern, ask for more information, move slowly and carefully. Admiral finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it silenced the room. "They are dying," he said. "Right now, as we sit here and talk, they are dying. They are killing them for daring to ask for basic rights, for daring to say they want to be free." He paused. We know what to do to those they consider beneath them. We know because they have done it to us." The council leader shook his head. "What would you have us do, Admiral? Start a war? They have hundreds of ships. We have less than 50. "I am not asking for war," replied. "I am asking for an answer. Someone called for help. I am asking that we answer." The debate continued late into the night. In the end, the council reached a compromise. They would send a diplomatic envoy to the Dominion. They would express concern about the situation. They would ask for peaceful dialogue. Admiral was given command of a defensive escort fleet, 47 ships to protect the diplomats on their journey. The council believed this was a reasonable precaution. They did not know what new. They did not know what those ships truly carried. For 20 years, while humanity struggled in the galactic community, they had also prepared. The galaxy believed Earth was building trade vessels and mining ships. The galaxy believed humans were peaceful and weak, focused only on commerce and survival. The galaxy was wrong. In secret shipyards hidden in asteroid fields and on dark moons, human engineers had built something else. Weapons that no other species had imagined. Ships designed not for commerce but for war. Technology developed by a species that had learned, through thousands of years of bloody history, that the universe did not protect the weak. The night before the fleet departed, stood before his commanders in a private meeting room. These were men and women he had served with for decades. They knew his pain. They shared it. "The Council believes we are going to protect diplomats," he said. "They believe we will stand quietly while politicians talk and nothing changes." He looked at each face in turn. "But I know why you are really here. I know what you carry in your hearts." Captain, commander of the flagship Soul's Wrath, nodded slowly. She had lost her brother at station. Lieutenant, the young tactical officer, clenched his fists. His entire family had died when they refused to help their colony. Sergeant Major Minu, leader of the Marine Forces, stood silent and ready. He had buried too many friends who died waiting for help that never came. "They see us as beggars," continued, his voice hardening. "They think we come with empty hands hopping for scraps of kindness. They think we are weak." He paused. "When we arrive, they will learn what human beggars carry in their pockets." No one smiled, no one cheered, they simply understood. The next morning, the 7th Armada left Earth orbit, 47 ships moving in perfect formation toward the distant stars. The diplomats aboard the lead vessel prepared their speeches and their arguments. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching Earth grow smaller behind them. He thought of his sister. He thought of the signals still playing in the monitoring stations. He thought of the dying alone, crying for help that no one would send. "Someone answered for us too late," he said quietly. "We will not make the same mistake." The fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving only silence behind. The fleet gathered in the darkness beyond the edge of the solar system, where the sun was just another star among millions. Captain walked through the corridors of the Soul's Wrath, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. The ship was alive with activity. Engineers checked systems. Soldiers prepared equipment. Everyone moved with purpose, knowing that something important was coming. She stopped at a window and looked out at the other ships. 47 vessels hung in the blackness, their running lights blinking like fireflies in the night. They were beautiful, she thought, beautiful and deadly. The Soul's Wrath was the largest ship in the fleet, 3 kilometers long, with armor plates thick enough to survive direct hits from most weapons in the galaxy. They had never seen a human warship this close. They thought human ships were small, weak, built for running away. They were about to learn different. Remembered the day she first walked aboard this ship, 5 years ago. She had just received news of her brother's death at station. They had refused to help. They said humans were not yet valuable enough to protect. Those words burned in her memory like fire that never went out. She had promised herself something that day. She promised that one day they would understand what they had created. They had taken something precious from her, from all of humanity, and humanity would answer. In the tactical center, Lieutenant sat surrounded by screens and data. He had not slept in 30 hours. His eyes were red, but his mind was sharp. He was running combat simulations, testing every scenario he could imagine. Was 28 years old, one of the youngest officers in the fleet. But age meant nothing when you had talent, and had talent that frightened even his teachers at the military academy. He had spent 6 years studying every ship design, every battle tactic, every strength and weakness. He knew their fleet better than most commanders did. He knew where their shields were weakest. He knew how their weapons systems needed time to recharge. He knew that their commanders were arrogant, used to fighting enemies who were afraid. His family had lived on a small colony world called Haven. It was a peaceful place with farms and schools and children playing in the streets. When raiders attacked, the colony sent emergency signals to everyone. They heard those signals. They had a patrol fleet only 2 hours away. They did not come. The raiders burned Haven to the ground, was off-world at the academy when it happened. He returned to find nothing but ash and silence. His parents, his 2 sisters, his grandmother, gone. He did not cry at their funeral. He simply made a promise. He would learn everything about and one day he would use that knowledge. Today was that day. In the medical bay, Doctor worked on translating more of the signals. The messages came in waves, each one more desperate than the last. She had learned much about in the past weeks. They were a gentle species. Before they conquered them, they had been artists and scientists. They built beautiful cities and wrote poetry about the stars. They had no weapons, no armies, no history of war. They had believed the universe was kind. They taught them different. For 300 years they served the Dominion. They worked in mines and factories. They built ships and weapons for their masters. They lived in poverty while they grew rich from their labor. They were not slaves in name, but they were slaves in truth. Recently, some had begun to ask for change. They did not demand freedom. They did not threaten violence. They simply asked for better conditions, better food, medical care for their children, the right to keep some of what they earned. The response was swift and terrible. They called it population adjustment. The rest of the galaxy called it genocide. Read the reports with tears in her eyes. Entire cities destroyed, families separated, children taken from parents and never seen again. The who sent the distress signal were the last survivors of a protest movement. They were hiding in underground tunnels, waiting to die. Why did they send the signal to us? Her assistant asked. Humans are new to the galaxy. We have no power, no influence. Everyone knows they could destroy us if they wanted. Thought about the question for a long moment. Maybe that is exactly why, she said finally. Everyone else in the galaxy is afraid of everyone else has something to lose. We have almost nothing. And perhaps they heard stories about humans, stories about how we treat those who ask for help. What stories? That we answer. In the cargo bay of the Soul's Wrath, Sergeant Major Minu inspected his Marines. 300 soldiers stood in perfect lines, their armor gleaming under the lights. These were the best fighters humanity had ever produced. Each one had volunteered for this mission. Each one knew they might not come home. Minu walked slowly between the rows, looking at faces he had trained and trusted. Some were young, barely out of training. Others were veterans with scars and stories. All of them had lost something to the galaxy's indifference. Every species out there thinks they know what humans are, Minu said, his voice carrying through the bay. They think we are soft. They think we are weak. They think we hide behind walls and hope the universe will leave us alone. He paused. They think wrong. He stopped in front of a young private with nervous eyes. What do they call us, soldier? They call us children, sir, new to the stars, not worth their attention. Mean you nodded. And what are we going to show them? The young private's voice grew stronger. That children grow up, sir. That's right, Minyu turned to address everyone. They have never faced human soldiers in real combat. They have seen our diplomats bow and smile. They have seen our merchants accept bad deals. They think that is all we are. His voice hardened. They have never seen us fight, not truly. When we land on that station, we are going to teach them a lesson they will never forget. Admiral Park stood alone on the observation deck, watching the stars. In a few hours, the fleet would jump to hyperspace and begin the journey to space. There would be no turning back. He thought about the diplomatic envoy traveling with them. Good people, honest people. They truly believed they could solve this problem with words. They did not understand that some problems could not be talked away. Some crimes demanded more than speeches. His communication device beeped, a message from Earth. The Council was sending final instructions, more warnings about being careful, more reminders to avoid conflict, more hopes for peaceful resolution. Read the message and deleted it. He knew what the Council wanted, but he also knew what was right. Somewhere across the galaxy, innocent beings were dying because no one would help them. Every powerful species looked away. Every advanced civilization found excuses. They were not useful enough, not important enough, not worth the trouble. Humanity had heard those same words before, at Station, at Haven, at a dozen other colonies left to burn while the galaxy watched and did nothing. Not anymore. The fleet communications officer announced that all ships were ready. Hyperspace engines were charged. Weapons systems were online. Every man and woman was at their station. Took one last look at the distant sun. Earth was back there, small and blue and precious. Everything he was fighting for, everything he wanted to protect. All ships, he said into his communicator. This is Admiral Park. We are about to enter space. The diplomats believe we are here to talk. Let them believe that. But remember why you truly came. Remember who called for help. Remember everyone we lost while the galaxy watched and did nothing. He paused, letting his words sink in. When the moment comes, we will show the universe what happens when the helpless cry out and humanity hears. We will show them what human anger looks like. We will show them why our ancestors survived ice ages and plagues and wars and extinction events. We will show them that we are not children playing among the stars. The fleet acknowledged his words with silence. No cheering, no celebration, just grim understanding. All ships commanded, jump. The 47 vessels of the 7th Armada vanished into hyperspace, leaving only empty darkness behind. The storm was gathering, and they had no idea what was coming. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace, like ghosts appearing from thin air. One moment, the space above Prime was empty and calm. The next moment, 47 warships hung in the darkness, their hulls still glowing from the energy of faster-than-light travel. On the defense station, alarm systems screamed to life. Officers ran to their screens, unable to believe what they were seeing. The sensors showed human vessels. Human, the primitive species from the distant arm of the galaxy, the ones who refused the Dominion's generous offer of service. Impossible, the station commander whispered. They bypassed all our border sensors. They came directly into our space without warning. How? No one had an answer. They had spent centuries building detection networks around their territory. No ship could enter without being noticed hours in advance. That was what they believed. That was what everyone believed. But humanity had developed something new, something the galaxy had never seen. A way to bend hyperspace around detection systems, to slip through the cracks in the universe itself. The technology was old and trusted. Human technology was new and hungry. High Speaker received the news in his private chambers aboard the orbital citadel. He was a tall being, with blue-gray skin and 4 arms that moved with ancient grace. He had ruled the Dominion for 80 years. In all that time, No species had dared to enter space without permission. His first reaction was amusement. "Humans," he said to his advisors, a sound like laughter in his voice. "The little creatures from that muddy planet, what do they want? Have they finally come to accept their proper place?" "Unknown High Speaker," an advisor replied. "They are not responding to our standard greeting signals. They simply wait in orbit." Four Arms made a gesture of dismissal. "Send emissary. He dealt with them before. He knows how to handle primitive species." Emissary received his orders with hidden worry. He remembered his last visit to Earth, 15 years ago. He remembered how the humans had refused the offer of service with strange fire in their eyes. He remembered warning the Council that these creatures were different. Dangerous, perhaps. No one had listened. Now he stood on the communication deck, preparing to greet the human fleet. He activated the broadcast system and spoke in the common galactic language, his voice smooth and confident. "Human vessels, you are welcome in space. The Dominion is pleased that you have finally chosen to seek our guidance. We are prepared to discuss your integration into our great civilization. Please stand down your defensive systems and prepare to receive our representatives." There was a long pause, then a human voice answered. "This is Admiral Park of the United Earth Fleet." Smiled, an admiral. The humans had sent someone important. Perhaps they were finally ready to be reasonable. "Admiral Park," replied warmly, "it is an honor. The Dominion welcomes you. What tribute have you brought to show your good intentions?" Another pause. When the human spoke again, his voice was cold and flat. "We received a signal from this planet, from beings who called themselves the..." Felt the first touch of unease. "They are internal subjects of the Dominion. Their affairs are not your concern." "They called for help," the admiral continued. "They said they were dying. They said they were killing them." A misunderstanding. Some disciplinary actions were necessary. They were becoming unstable. We restored order. "You called genocide order." The word hung in the silence. Noticed that his heart was beating faster. "Admiral," he said carefully, "you are speaking of matters you do not understand. They have maintained peace and stability in this region for thousands of years. They benefit greatly from our protection. Sometimes difficult decisions must be made for the greater good." "I see." Waited. He expected the human to argue, to negotiate, to eventually accept reality like every other species did. They were powerful. Everyone knew that. No one challenged them directly. But Admiral Park did not argue. "We are not here to negotiate," the human said. "We are not here to serve. We are not here to accept your explanations or your excuses." "Then why are you here?" asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "We are here to answer." Before could respond, his screens lit up with new data. The human ships were moving into combat formation. Weapon systems were powering up. Energy signatures were appearing that the computers could not identify. "What is this?" demanded. "What are you doing?" Something no one else would do. Something everyone was too afraid to try. On the Soul's Wrath, Captain watched the tactical display with calm eyes. They were scrambling their defense fleet. 200 ships were moving to intercept the human vessels. They outnumbered the Armada 4-1. The odds would have terrified any other species, but humans had never been very good at understanding odds. "They think this is a negotiation," Lieutenant said from his station. "Look at their formation. They are spreading out to surround us. Standard intimidation tactics. They expect us to back down." "Will we?" asked, though she already knew the answer. Smiled for the first time in days. "No." Admiral broadcast one final message, not just but to every receiver in the system, to the hiding underground, to the slaves working in orbital factories, to anyone who could hear. "This message is for the beings who sent the distress signal. We heard you. We came. You are not alone anymore." He paused. And this message is for the Dominion. You had the power to protect the innocent. You chose to kill them instead. You watched others suffer and did nothing. Now you will learn that someone in this universe still answers when the helpless cry out. High Speaker listened to the message in his chamber. His amusement had faded. Something cold was growing in his chest, something he had not felt in decades. "What are they doing?" he asked his military commander. "They cannot think they can fight us. We have 200 ships, they have less than 50. The commander studied the sensor data. "High Speaker, I am detecting weapon signatures I do not recognize. Energy outputs that should not be possible from vessels that size. I recommend we approach with caution." "Caution?" His voice rose with anger. "Against humans, they are insects, crush them." The commander hesitated. "High Speaker, these readings suggest." "I gave you an order." The fleet advanced, their ships elegant and ancient, decorated with symbols of 1,000 victories. They had never lost a war. They had never faced an enemy they could not defeat. The humans were outnumbered, and this would be simple. On the surface of Prime, in the dark tunnels where the survivors hid, beings with gentle faces and frightened eyes gathered around old communication devices. They heard the human admiral's message. They heard him say they were not alone. Some of them wept. Some of them prayed. Some simply stared at the ceiling, imagining the sky above, where impossible things were happening. "Who are these humans?" a young asked. An old one who remembered stories from before the conquest shook his head. "I do not know, but they came. When everyone else looked away, they came." Above them, the stars began to burn. Emissary stood on the observation deck, watching the human fleet hold position as the armada approached. They should be running. Any sane species would run. The mathematics were simple, 200 against 47. Victory was certain. But the humans did not run. They simply waited. And as watched their ships power up weapons that glowed with unfamiliar light, he felt something he had never experienced in his long life. Fear. "What have we awakened?" he whispered to himself. No one answered. But somewhere, across the cold darkness of space, Admiral Park stood on his bridge with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the enemy approach. "All ships," he said calmly, "weapons free." The first human missiles launched into the void, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first ship exploded before its commander even understood what was happening. The human missiles moved faster than anything they had ever seen. They did not travel in straight lines like normal weapons. They twisted and turned, avoiding defensive fire, finding gaps in shield coverage that should not have existed. They hit with force that turned metal into fire and fire into nothing. 3 ships died in the first 10 seconds, then 5 more, then 10. On the command ship, officers screamed in confusion. Their shields, built to withstand the weapons of 100 different species, failed like paper against flame. Their defensive systems, designed by the greatest engineers in the Dominion, could not track the incoming fire. "What is happening?" the fleet commander demanded. "What are these weapons?" No one could answer. The human missiles were not like anything in the database. They did not use the standard propulsion systems. They did not follow known physics. They were impossible. But they were also very real. On the Soul's Wrath, Lieutenant worked his controls with cold precision. Years of study, years of planning, years of hate forged into something useful. He knew exactly where to strike. He knew every weakness in the formation. "Their flagship is redirecting power to front shields," he reported. "They expect a direct assault." "Then we give them something different," Captain replied. "Attack pattern 7. Hit them from below and behind." The human fleet moved like a single living thing. 47 ships dancing through space with grace that seemed impossible for vessels so large. They tried to adjust, tried to reform their lines, but they were too slow. Their tactics were designed for enemies who fought like they expected, predictable, orderly, afraid. Humans were none of those things. Admiral Park watched the battle unfold on his tactical screen. The red symbols of ships were disappearing one by one. 30 destroyed in the first 5 minutes, 50 in the first 10. The enemy formation was breaking apart as commanders panicked and tried to flee. "They are not used to this," said quietly. "They have forgotten what real war looks like." They had fought many battles over their long history, but those battles had rules, expectations. Both sides would maneuver and threaten until the weaker one surrendered. Actual combat was rare. Destruction of ships was expensive and wasteful. Humans had a different philosophy. In human history, war was not a game of position and bluff. War was survival. War was everything you had against everything they had, with no mercy and no retreat. Human ships were built to fight until they could not fight anymore. Human weapons were designed to kill, not to threaten. They had never faced anything like this. "Enemy dreadnought is charging main weapons," announced. "They are targeting civilian stations on the planet's orbit." His expression hardened. They would kill their own subjects to hurt us. They do not see thee as subjects. They see them as property. Destroying property to win a battle is acceptable to them. Not to us. Turn to her weapons officer. Disable that ship. Do not destroy it. There may be workers aboard. The Soul's wrath turned toward the dreadnought. Its main guns fired, beams of directed energy that cut through the shields and sliced into the engine systems. The dreadnought went dark, drifting powerless in space, unable to fire or flee. "Vessel disabled," confirmed. "No significant casualties detected." Good looked at the main screen. "We are not them. We do not kill those who cannot fight back." Across the battle, similar scenes played out. Human ships were faster, stronger, more adaptable than anything they had expected. But they did not massacre fleeing enemies. They did not target escape pods. They did not destroy ships that had surrendered. They fought with terrible power and surprising mercy, and somehow that made them more frightening. High Speaker watched from his orbital citadel as his mighty fleet was torn apart. 100 ships destroyed in the first 20 minutes, another 50 disabled or fleeing. The humans had lost only 3 vessels. "This is impossible," he whispered. "How can they do this? They are primitives, children. They should not have weapons like this." Emissary stood nearby, his face pale with shock. "We underestimated them, High Speaker. We looked at them and saw what we wanted to see. We never imagined they could be this." "What are they?" Thought about everything he had learned about humans, their strange history of constant war against each other, their survival through disasters that would have destroyed other species, their stubborn refusal to accept the natural order of the galaxy. "They are what happens when you push something into a corner and give it no choice but to fight," he said slowly. "They are what happens when you hurt something enough times that it decides to hurt back." Below them, on the surface of Prime, they emerged from their hiding places. They looked up at the sky, where ships burned like falling stars. They had lived under rule for 300 years. They had believed they would die under rule. But now, impossible things were happening. "Who are they?" the young asked again, watching the lights in the sky. The old one beside him was crying. "They are humans from a distant world called Earth. They heard our signal, and they came." "Why, we are nothing to them. We have nothing to offer." "I do not know," the old one's voice broke. "I do not know why they came, but they are here." After 300 years of silence, someone finally answered. In space, the battle was ending. The fleet had lost 170 ships. The survivors were fleeing or surrendering. Human vessels moved through the wreckage, rescuing escape pods regardless of species. Anyone who was alive and needed help. Doctor monitored communications from her station. She was receiving signals from across the system, distress calls, surrender requests, but also something else, messages from the planet below. They were broadcasting, simple signals, single words repeated over and over. "What are they saying?" Admiral asked. Listened, her translation system working. When she understood, she had to take a moment before she could speak. "They are saying a word in their language," she said. "It means impossible or miracle. It is the same word for them." She paused. "They are saying it like a prayer." Closed his eyes. For a moment, he was not an admiral commanding a fleet. He was just a man who had lost people he loved, a man who had waited years for this moment. "Sergeant Major," he said into his communicator, "prepare your Marines. We are taking the orbital citadel." "Yes, sir." Minu's voice was steady and eager. "We have been ready for a long time." The Soul's Wrath moved toward the massive station where High Speaker waited. Other human ships formed a protective ring around it, ensuring no reinforcements could interfere. Looked at the station on her screen, the seat of power in this region, the place where decisions were made to enslave and murder. "They expected us to come begging," she said. "They expected us to bow and plead and accept whatever scraps they offered." "They expected wrong," replied. Yes, his voice was cold and satisfied. "They did." The human Marines loaded into their transport ships. 300 soldiers ready to do what soldiers had done throughout human history, ready to kick down the doors of tyrants and drag them into the light. Broadcast one final message to the orbital citadel. "High Speaker, your fleet is destroyed. Your power is broken. We are coming for you, not to kill you, not to torture you, but to show you something you have forgotten." "What?" His voice came back, shaking with rage and fear. "That actions have consequences, that the universe contains beings who will not look away when innocents suffer, that humanity answers." The transport ships launched toward the station, carrying soldiers and hope and 300 years of waiting. The heavens had burned, and now it was time for the reckoning. The transport ships cut through the darkness toward the orbital citadel. Sergeant Major Minu stood at the front of the lead vessel, his armor sealed and his weapon ready. Around him, 300 Marines waited in silence. They had trained for years. They had dreamed of this moment. Now it was here. "Listen up," Minu said, his voice calm through the helmet communicator. "They have never faced human ground forces. They think they are superior warriors. They are larger than us, stronger, better armored." He paused. "They are wrong about what matters." The Marines listened. Some were veterans. Some were young soldiers on their first real mission. All of them understood what was at stake. "We are not fighting for territory," Minu continued. "We are not fighting for resources. We are fighting for something they do not understand. We are fighting because someone asked for help and we said yes." The transport ship shuddered as it docked with the station's outer hull. Cutting beams activated, slicing through metal that had not been breached in centuries. The built strong stations, but they had never imagined anyone would be foolish enough to attack them. The first Marines poured through the breach, weapons firing. Defenders waited on the other side, tall beings in ceremonial armor that had not seen real combat in generations. They expected the humans to be weak, small, easy targets. They died thinking those thoughts. Human weapons were brutal and efficient. Human tactics were born from thousands of years of fighting and dying and learning. The Marines moved through the corridors like water through cracks, always advancing, never stopping. Minu led from the front. He had promised himself he would be first through every door, first to face every danger. A good leader did not ask his soldiers to do what he would not do himself. A guard appeared around a corner, 4 arms raised with weapons in each hand. The alien was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, muscles built by a lifetime of genetic enhancement and combat training. In any fair fight, they would win. Minu did not believe in fair fights. He dropped low beneath the angle of the alien's weapons and fired 3 shots into the joints where the leg armor met the body armor. The stumbled. Minu was on him in an instant, his combat knife finding the gap beneath the helmet. The fight lasted 4 seconds. Move, Minu ordered. Command center is 3 levels up. The Marines advanced. They took casualties. Some soldiers fell and did not get up. But for every human who went down, 10 died. The defenders were brave, but bravery was not enough against soldiers who had spent their lives preparing for exactly this moment. High Speaker watched the battle on his security screens. The humans were everywhere. His elite guards were falling one by one. The command center would be breached in minutes. "How is this happening?" he demanded. "They are primitives." Emissary stood near the door, knowing that running was pointless. "They are not primitives, High Speaker. They never were. We simply refuse to see the truth." "What truth?" "That they are what we once were, before we became comfortable, before we became certain of our own superiority, before we forgot what it meant to fight for survival." The door to the command center exploded inward. Smoke and debris filled the air. Through the cloud walked Sergeant Major Minu, his armor scorched and dented but his stride steady. Behind him came more Marines, weapons raised, spreading out to cover every corner of the room. Personal guards raised their weapons. They were the best soldiers in the Dominion, chosen for their loyalty and skill. They had protected the High Speaker for decades. They lasted 8 seconds. Minu stepped over their bodies and stopped in front of. The High Speaker was taller than him by nearly a meter. In his ceremonial robes and golden chains, he looked like a god compared to the small, blood-stained human before him. But it was who trembled. "High Speaker," Minu said, his voice flat, "you are under arrest for crimes against the people. You will face trial. You will answer for what you have done." "Under whose authority?" His voice cracked. "You have no jurisdiction here. You are nothing. Your species is nothing." "We are here," Minu replied. "That is all the authority we need." Admiral Park arrived 20 minutes later, after his shuttle landed in the captured docking bay. He walked through corridors filled with wounded and watchful Marines. He stepped over broken doors and shattered statues. He climbed stairs that had not seen violence in 1,000 years. When he reached the command center, he found sitting in a corner, hands bound, surrounded by guards. The High Speaker looked small now, old, confused. Stood before him and said nothing for a long moment. "Do you know why we came?" he finally asked. Looked up, his eyes were empty. "For power, for revenge, for territory, that is why anyone comes." "No," shook his head. "We came because of a signal, a simple message from beings we had never met asking for help, that is all." "That is impossible. No species travels across the galaxy for strangers." "Humans do." Stared at him. "Why, what do you gain?" Thought about his sister, about Station, about all the colonies that had called for help and received only silence. He thought about the choice that faced every species in the universe: look away from suffering or answer. 3 centuries ago," he said, "you conquered they were peaceful. They had no weapons, no way to fight back. They asked other species for help. They sent signals across the stars, begging for someone to care, and everyone ignored them. Everyone decided they were not worth the trouble." "They were not," said. "They had nothing to offer. Why should anyone risk war for creatures with no value?" "Because they were suffering, because they asked, because the universe should not work the way you think it does." His voice hardened. "You taught that no one would come. That hope was foolish. That the strong take and the weak accept. You taught that lesson to everyone who watched." "It is the truth." "It was the truth, until today." Turned to look out the viewport. Below, Prime glowed soft blue and green. Above, the wreckage of the fleet drifted in silent clouds. Today, the universe learned something different. Today, the universe learned that someone will answer. Doctor found Emissary in a small room off the main corridor. He was wounded, not seriously, sitting alone while medics treated more critical patients. She sat down beside him. "You tried to warn them," she said. "Years ago when you visited Earth, you told your council that humans were different." looked at her with tired eyes. They did not listen, they saw what they wanted to see, a weak species, easily controlled, not worth concern. Why did you see differently? He was quiet for a moment. When I visited Earth, I watched your people. I saw your cities, your art, your history. I saw the monuments you built to your wars, the museums filled with weapons, the stories you tell your children about fighting against impossible odds. He paused. Every other species I had studied tried to hide their violent past. They were ashamed of it, but humans displayed it proudly, not because you love violence, but because you refused to forget what you were capable of. Nodded slowly. We remember so we can do better, but we also remember so we never become helpless. I understand that now. Looked at the floor. We thought you came as beggars seeking alliance, protection. We thought you were weak. We came because someone was suffering and we could help. Stood. You never even considered that possibility, did you? No, we did not. He met her eyes. Perhaps that is why we were never truly great. We had power, but we never understood what it was for. On the surface of Prime, the first human shuttles landed. Marines secured the area while medical teams set up field hospitals. Engineers began assessing the damage from years of occupation. They came out slowly at first. They had hidden for so long that sunlight felt strange on their skin. They looked at the human soldiers with wonder and fear. These small creatures had destroyed the fleet that had oppressed them for 300 years. Sergeant Major Minu removed his helmet and knelt before a group of children. They stared at him with huge eyes, trembling. "It is okay," he said gently. "You are safe now. No one will hurt you anymore." One child, braver than the others, reached out and touched Minu's armored hand. The metal was cold and hard, but the child did not pull away. "Why did you come?" the child asked in halting galactic common. Minu smiled. It was the first real smile he had worn in years. "Because you asked." The child did not understand. But someday, when the child was older and the stories were told properly, the child would learn. The child would learn that somewhere in the vast darkness of the universe, there was a species that answered when the helpless called. Not because they gained anything. Not because they had to. Simply because it was right. Admiral watched from the shuttle as his people began the work of healing. It would take years, maybe decades. The scars of 300 years would not vanish overnight. But it had begun, and that was enough. He looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, other species were watching. Other tyrants were wondering. Other oppressed peoples were hopping. The reckoning had come, and it was only the beginning.